It's Thursday, April 16th, and this is now on HNN.
Yes, I will be taking a pay cut.
Job losses mount as economic pain deepens worldwide and here at home amid the coronavirus crisis.
The nation's death toll has risen sharply, with now more than 31,000 victims. I'm Elise Preston in New York, where a new safety measure is taking effect this week.
We can and must do better.
A new report suggests that top Chinese officials might have known about the potential scope of the coronavirus threat nearly a week before alerting the public.
Only 2 members from each soldier's family will be allowed.
No hugs, kisses, or lei, just temperature checks and a salute from a distance as hundreds of Hawaii Army National Guard soldiers return from the Middle East.
It's not going to just go away like that.
These stories, plus we're checking in with U.S. Senator Mazie Hirono, coming up on This Is Now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan, your director-producer here at This Is Now, alongside Ashley here. We're going to start today, like we do on most, with some new numbers from the Department of Health. A small increase in the number of cases, right, Ash?
Yep, health officials are reporting 11 new COVID-19 cases today, bringing the statewide total to 541. Of the new cases, 4 are on Oahu, 3 are on Maui County, and the rest are still under investigation. Hawaii's death toll stands at 9, and 374 people have been released from isolation. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of state workers are bracing for pay cuts. Several unions are fighting it, but the governor says it can't be avoided since the federal funding we're getting can't be used for payroll. Here's Chelsea Davis.
The state is expecting $867 million from the feds, but the governor says it's for public health and not a single penny can be used for existing state programs or state employees. Governor David Ige says $1.5 billion needs to be cut from the state budget because the state's main sources of revenue have been drastically reduced due to COVID-19.
When you consider that there are more than 100 hotels all across the state completely shut down, meaning that we're getting zero income from those properties, you can see, and that includes restaurants and other facilities in those hotels.
To make that happen, he's proposing a 20% pay cut for most state workers, like teachers and first responders.
Whatever pay cut comes from employees, a similar pay cut would be enacted against my salary as well as cabinet members.
It appears as if the governor's cabinet had no idea.
Wow, bro!
The governor just announced it.
I'm a team player. All in. Whatever is needed for the state, absolutely.
That was the state's COVID-19 incident commander finding out the news during a Senate hearing this afternoon. And this was Hawaii's lieutenant governor when asked about the proposed cuts earlier today.
I haven't been a part of that conversation. If there's a pay cut for any workers, cut my pay first.
Among those who did know, Hawaii State Teachers Association President Corey Rosenlee. He says cuts to education is unacceptable.
The state also has over $1 billion in its cash surplus and its rainy day fund. Governor, it's raining.
Ige says in order to use the rainy day fund, he needs the legislature to agree. Teachers say it's a no-brainer.
I'm in my second year of teaching, so my pay isn't very high. I have just started climbing the pay scale. My paychecks go directly towards supporting my family.
We just don't understand why we would be looked at first as far as, trying to balance the budget. It always seems like the budget is trying to be balanced on the backs of the most essential workers.
I've been teaching for 30 years. I've gone through pay cuts in the past. I've gone through the furloughs, neither of which I have financially recovered from.
The governor did say today that everything is up for discussion. It's still not clear how many state workers could have to take a cut. According to the Council of State Governments, Governor Ige makes about $160,000. Chelsea Davis, Hawaii News Now.
And coming up later in the show, we're going to hear from Senator Mazie Hirono about why that federal aid cannot be used to cover payroll.
Yep, that interview is coming up in just a few minutes here on This Is Now on this Facebook Live feed. Meanwhile, the national death toll has risen sharply. It's well above above 31,000 now. That's partly because New York is now counting deaths of people who had symptoms but were never tested. We got Elise Preston in New York right now. She filed this report.
New Jersey is investigating a nursing home after 17 bodies were found in a morgue that was intended to hold only 4.
New Jerseyans living in our long-term care facilities deserve to be cared for with respect, compassion, and dignity. We can and must do better.
There have been 28 deaths linked to the facility since March 30th. 14 have been confirmed COVID positive.
Here in New York State, a new order goes into effect tomorrow. Everyone must have their faces covered when they can't maintain social distancing. That includes walking on a public street, using public transportation, or grocery shopping.
The mayor of New York City says the number of hospitalizations and positive tests have gone up in the last 24 hours.
This was a tough day. This is not what we're looking for.
Smithfield Foods, whose plant in South Dakota is linked to more than 600 cases, announced it is temporarily closing 2 other plants in Wisconsin and Missouri. But in Nevada, where the death toll is less than half of 1% of the population, the mayor of Las Vegas is demanding the state get back to work.
It makes no sense. For heaven's sakes, for being closed is killing us already.
Many health experts say more widespread testing is needed before restrictions are lifted. But one sign of things getting back to normal, a new Long Island mother meeting her son for the first time Wednesday after she recovered from the coronavirus. Doctors delivered Yanira Soriano's baby while she was in a medically induced coma. Elise Preston, CBS News, New York.
Now to new developments in Japan. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has announced a state of emergency for the entire country amid the pandemic. Abe says the measure takes effect Friday and lasts until May 6th, which is the end of Japan's Golden Week holiday. He says the measure is aimed at stopping cross-border movement of people.
I totally forgot that this was Golden Week, which is traditionally a huge uptick in tourism here on the islands. We're going without this year, and obviously they're feeling the crunch there as well. All right, a new report from the Associated Press suggests that top Chinese officials might have known about the potential scope of the outbreak well before alerting the public. We've got a CNN reporter, that's David Culver, reporting now on this. He brings us the update.
The internal documents acquired by the Associated Press suggest that China's top officials knew the potential severity of the virus, but for 6 days held off on sounding the alarm to the public. The AP report is based on what they characterize as a leaked memo from a confidential teleconference involving the head of China's National Health Commission. CNN has gone through the government's public release of that teleconference, which highlights the worries expressed by health officials to other leaders. Now, here's what we know of what China knew and when. Going back to December 8th, the Wuhan government disclosed the first patient's symptoms of the then unknown virus. Nearly a month later, on January 3rd, Wuhan health officials stressed there is no obvious human-to-human transmission. And on that same day, China notified the U.S. of the virus. On January 7th, President Xi Jinping's first public awareness is made known, and he ordered actions to be taken. A week after that, on January 14th, that's the teleconference, and that's when, according to a government release, which came out more than a month after the conference, there was a sober understanding of the situation that was made known to top government officials. And they added that, quote, clustered cases suggest that human-to-human transmission is possible. But here's the concern. Publicly, as late as January 19th, the Wuhan Health Commission said that the outbreak was controllable and preventable and not contagious. The next day, a very different narrative. Leading health officials acknowledged that cases of human-to-human transmission, and even they stressed that medical personnel had gotten infected. 3 days later, Wuhan went on lockdown. Now, in response to past questions over transparency, China has repeatedly maintained that they have been open and forthcoming in their handling of this outbreak. CNN has reached out to the National Health Commission for their comment on this latest reporting. David Culver, CNN, Shanghai.
Interesting timeline there. Now, the virus appears to be receding in France, one of the world's hardest hit countries. The National Health Agency chief says the epidemic looks to be reaching a long plateau that is evolving slowly downward instead of hitting a peak followed by a sharp drop. 2 weeks ago, France saw a 58% weekly jump in deaths nationwide.
All right, we want to talk about unemployment now because each week millions of Americans are losing their jobs because of this outbreak. Many recently laid off workers say they've actually found a full-time job filing for unemployment. It's a lot of work. We're hearing stories about people putting in hundreds of calls to these offices, the websites crashing. Michael George takes a look at this from a national perspective. He filed this report.
The timing couldn't have been worse. Bree Roche-Lilliot and her fiance both lost their jobs right as they were planning their wedding.
I received a kind of very formal letter from HR saying that all employees were being furloughed for the time being.
Similar emails have hit a staggering number of inboxes. Another 5.2 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week. That brings the total number of jobs lost in 4 weeks to approximately 22 million. When Bree tried to file, she found the New York website overloaded.
I spent probably about 3 hours just trying to apply online. And as many people have said, the system would just time you out if you didn't get through it.
Even after she filed, Bree was told she had to confirm her application by phone.
We are experiencing high call volumes at this time.
She's been calling and calling.
How many times do you think you've tried to call the unemployment office?
It would have to be in the 500 to 600 range, at least.
Americans across the country are reporting similar filing problems. Some states are overhauling their websites.
We're working with Google to come up with an online mechanism that bypasses any phone certification.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says 300 additional staffers have been hired to process claims.
And it's just so demoralizing that I would just give up for the rest of the day. I mean, it feels like running in a hamster wheel. Like feels to be no sign of progress.
Many states are promising benefits will be retroactive for people who can't get through. Michael George, CBS News, New York.
Now to those stimulus checks, the federal government said about 80 million Americans were supposed to get their deposits this week. Many have already, but some people are reporting that their money ended up in a bank account that didn't belong to them. The IRS is telling people to check your bank to see if the deposits went in. You can also check the IRS's Get My Payment page to check on the status. Now, an IRS spokeswoman told USA Today if that money went to the wrong account, it should get returned to the IRS, who will then turn around and cut you a paper check. But that process could likely take a while.
All right, time now for our new digital series, Checking In. Just a very short time ago, Ashley sat down with Senator Mazie Hirono to see what's going on in Washington. Let's check in.
All right, we are checking in today with U.S. Senator Mazie Hirono. She is in Washington, D.C. Good afternoon, Senator.
Oh, good afternoon, Ashley, and everybody else in Hawaii. Aloha, I miss you guys.
I know, we miss you too. So I know Congress, you recently passed the CARES Act. People here in Hawaii are starting to see those stimulus checks coming in. What are you guys working on now?
COVID-4, because we know that we have a lot more to do to help small businesses. And the $350 billion that we set aside for the small businesses is called the PPP program, went out really fast. And my concern, shared by my Democratic colleagues, is who got this money? What was the average amount of the loans? What I found out yesterday was the average amount of the PPP loan was $240,000. Now, that's not exactly what we would call helping what we call mom and pops and what we think of as small businesses. So the next COVID-4 bill will provide, of course, a lot more support for actual small businesses. And we're going to now need to lay those parameters because we didn't do that in COVID-3. And then the other huge part of this is to help the state and local governments with their budget shortfalls. And I know that Hawaii is going to have a budget shortfall because of our reliance on tourism and the fact that the tourists aren't coming, and that's had an impact all across Hawaii's economy. So that is a huge part of what we're doing. And I was in contact with Governor Ige. In fact, just this morning, I asked him if he hadn't already done so to contact the White House to let the White House know that this kind of budget support is going to be critical to help the state and counties. And they had already done that. And he said they were doing another day, meaning the governors all across the country were doing another White House call to press that point. I think it's going to be very critical.
Yes, yesterday, Governor Ige, he said that none of the federal money that the state will be getting can be used for existing programs or existing employees or to replace lost revenue. Is that true, and why is that?
Well, the first thing was that we wanted to make sure that we were reimbursing the money that was going out of the state coffers to fight and get ready to deal with the pandemic. And so we wanted to make sure that that reimbursement money was there. And in fact, when I talked with our state leaders, that was one of the first things they asked me, are we going to get reimbursed for all of the money that we're going to need to spend to fight this virus? So that was a first order of business. Now we know, of course, that going forward, practically every state, most states are seeing a budget shortfall, and we want to address that. However, it's going to take a lot of pushing on the White House because they're not exactly on board with this part of what we need to do with the next COVID bill. But I'm hopeful that the Republican governors who are also facing shortfalls, that they're going to also weigh in, particularly with the White House, to press for that kind of support.
Mm-hmm. The head of the State Labor Department, Scott Murakami, he said yesterday that the state's unemployment trust fund may run out of money by May 10th. Has the state been in contact with you guys, our congressional delegation, about what happens if that does happen, and about loans with the U.S. Department of Labor?
That's going to be another area, the benefits, the UI benefits, and the extending the time frame and adding $600 more to the unemployment insurance benefit checks was a big battle. I can tell you that to get that into COVID-3. So we know that as the number of unemployment people increase millions all across our country, that's another area that we are going to need to shore up with the next COVID bill.
For you personally, Senator, how has this impacted, your life, your day-to-day? I know you haven't been home in a long time. You said maybe since February?
Yes, and the thing is that I was planning to go back to Hawaii during our April state work period, but that was canceled. The work period was canceled so that we could work on COVID-3. And then, of course, with the 14-day quarantine, it didn't make that much, it wasn't that reasonable for me to go back. And like so many people in our country, millions of people in our country who have pre-existing conditions, I have pre-existing conditions, and I'm very aware of the need to be protective of myself and others. So, I'm hunkered down at home. I've set up like a little office thing in my home, and I have a really tiny place, but it works well. My entire staff, as I said, is teleworking. It's all very new for us, but we continue to respond to inquiries and do everything we can to keep our work going.
Is it hard for you to be there when all of this is happening in Hawaii? I know, and your family's here too. Your mom, you're so close to your mom.
My mother is in a care facility and we're not able to see her. So I send her pictures and, we do our best to stay in touch. But it is a heartache, not just for me, but for so many people in our country who can't see our loved ones.
What are you doing to pass the time? Are you doing puzzles? Are you reading? What are you doing?
I read. I do admit to watching Netflix. I do binge watch sometimes. And I finally got on to Veep, which I had never watched because I don't have HBO. It's pretty hilarious. I also make my own paper, and I do a lot of artsy things because I love art, and I make my own paper, and I make these cards I will show you, including, I paint cherry blossoms, which are my favorite flowers, on some of my cards, but all this paper I make myself.
Well, thank you, Senator, for checking in with us, and we want you to be safe and healthy, and thank you for all the work you're doing for us on Capitol Hill.
Aloha to everyone in Hawaii. Stay safe and take care of yourselves. Be kind to yourself and others.
Right, just checking in with Maisie Hirono there. Little explanation on some of the jargon she was using.
Right, so you heard her say COVID-3, COVID-4. Those are the different bills that Congress has been working on. So COVID-4 is the new one that Congress is working on right now.
She'll have to show me some paper skills.
Yeah, I love seeing how different people are passing
spending their time. She's not a puzzle person, but just now getting into Veep? Come on.
I know, I love Veep.
All right. Meanwhile, a historic homecoming took place here overnight. And as Stephanie Lum shows us, these hundreds of National Guard members that returned home last night had a very interesting, probably the most socially distanced homecoming ceremony ever.
300 soldiers with the 1st Battalion, 487th Field Artillery touched down at 5 p.m. from Fort Bliss, Texas. Welcomed home with spouting water cannons from federal fire trucks and a beautiful rainbow in the mist. Here's the view from inside the plane. The unit returning from a year-long deployment to Iraq and Afghanistan, where they supported U.S. forces in Operation Freedom Sentinel.
Big mahalos to Ikino Artillery Association. Thank you guys for your support through our deployment. Can't wait to see you guys. Ikino!
They deployed 2 other times to the Middle East, but at this homecoming, there were no warm hugs, kisses, no lay, just temperature checks and a salute from a distance.
There will be no marching. No formations. Only 2 members from each soldier's family will be allowed to attend the event. And they will not leave their cars. This will be the most physically distanced reunion ceremony in our history. It is not ideal, but it is necessary.
And when the soldiers finally did reunite with their ohana, I'm told there was a long line of family members in their cars with their trunks open. One by one, the soldiers put their bags in the trunk, closed it, hopped in, and drove home. Social distancing, the new norm, even for military homecomings. Stephanie Lum, Hawaii News Now.
Welcome home to those soldiers. Researchers at UH's John A. Burns School of Medicine are working on a test for immunity to COVID-19, but they're going to need millions in funding. Honolulu Civil Beat reports researchers are developing a blood test to check for antibodies to the virus. The test would be meant for those who may have been exposed to the virus but never showed symptoms. They hope the test would find immune residents and help them get back to work more quickly. The school would need $250,000 to validate the test and then at least $4 million to administer the test across the state. Officials will approach the legislature and other foundations this week to seek that funding.
All right, one professional sports team has plans to return to action, and world leaders are discussing how to continue to battle this outbreak. Nancy Chin has a wrap-up of some of today's other headlines.
President Trump hosted a virtual meeting of G7 leaders Thursday to coordinate global responses to the pandemic. The White House says the group discussed the next steps to restore health, safety, and prosperity. The leaders were supposed to meet in June at Camp David, the presidential retreat in Maryland, but that's been canceled. Professional golf is returning in June. The PGA says it will resume its regular season the week of June 8th with the Charles Schwab Challenge in Fort Worth, Texas. The first 4 PGA events will be closed to spectators. The NFL is still working on its post-pandemic plan. The season is tentatively scheduled to begin in September, with the league reportedly considering numerous options, including playing games in empty or partially filled stadiums. And an 88-year-old man came up with an inventive way to show his wife a love letter at her Massachusetts nursing home, which is not allowing visitors. Nick Aptex arranged for a bucket crane to lift him to his wife Marion's 3rd-story window earlier this month. His message read, "I love you, sweetheart." The couple has been married for 61 years. Nancy Chin, CBS News, New York.
That is so sweet.
I know, the cherry bucket or whatever that's called.
Cherry picker.
Cherry picker.
Close.
Adorable. Yeah.
So Saturday Night Live star Michael Che is honoring his late grandmother by paying 1 month's rent for all the people in her former public housing complex. That's 160 units. Now, Che's grandmother died after contracting the coronavirus, and the SNL star expressed dismay that public housing residents are still expected to pay rent when many New Yorkers aren't able to work. The comedian paid tribute to her on last week's episode of SNL. He signed off from his segment saying, quote, "From Weekend Update, I'm Martha's grandbaby."
All right, a 99-year-old British war veteran has captured the hearts of millions across the world after raising millions for healthcare workers in the midst of this outbreak. You got to see this story. It's really, I've been waiting to watch this all afternoon. Charles DeGata has the story from London.
A couple of weeks ago, World War II veteran Captain Tom Moore came up with a new way to serve his country. 100 laps of his garden, 10 a day, in time for his 100th birthday. A way of saying thank you to Britain's National Health Service for his new hip, hoping to raise maybe £1,000, roughly $1,200. A little morale boost in a country hurting for inspiration.
Remember, tomorrow is a good day. Tomorrow you'll maybe find everything be much better than today, even if today was all right.
Captain Tom had no idea how good his tomorrow was about to become. The donations began pouring in, so he upped the ante. Why not £500,000? Soon, he sprinted past that too. Within days, Captain Tom became a household name, with people getting daily updates on his progress. Because here's what Captain Tom tapped into: a national outpouring of support for Britain's straining health workers. Understaffed and under-equipped in dealing with a death toll that has now surged past 13,000, including doctors and nurses.
Thank you so much for all of your efforts and how much money you've raised for the NHS.
So with each step, Captain Tom was carrying the country along with him, and not just Britain. Soon people from more than 50 nations, including the United States, pitched in. 1 million became 2 million, 4 million, 8 million. At that point, he even got a shout out from Health Secretary Matt Hancock.
Captain Tom, you're an inspiration to us all, and we thank you.
10 million, thousands of dollars by the minute. By the morning of his last day, Captain Tom had raised more than $16 million. And along the way, he raised hope.
The sun will shine on you again and the clouds will go away.
Captain Tom is fond of the saying, "Fortune favors the brave." He could not have been more right.
Inches to go, and there he is.
Charlie D'Agata, CBS News, London.
Captain Tom.
I love it.
It's adorable. Yeah.
$16 million.
That shows you what anyone can do and to help out here. That's really, really, really inspiring there. All right, got some news to tell you about coming up here at 1:30. Mayor Caldwell holding a press conference. We're going to bring that to you live on television and here on your H&N digital platforms. And then another press conference coming up at 2:30, a briefing with the governor. So we'll have to stay tuned to see what all unfolds this afternoon. Please don't forget to sign up for those e-newsletters. You still have time to do that. If you can't catch those press conferences, you can get updated right in your inbox of your email. Wanted to leave you today with something special. At a nursing home in Indiana, this is Creekside Village, some horses were brought in to visit the nursing home patients who are isolated. Pretty inspiring there as well. Stay safe, everyone. Have a good day.